I'm excited. We have our first guest of season 2. Pretty exciting.
I'm
Are you
excited
excited?
too. I'm so excited to not just be talking to you.
It's not just me.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Zach Conway here with Kelsey McKenna. We talk a lot about how you actually articulate your value proposition in your business, how you tell a certain story. But what happens when your customer base changes because they're new and they're potentially from a new generation? And so whatever that story and how you articulate your value maybe doesn't work the same way it did as you built your business with a different cohort of customers this whole time. So that's what we're talking about today. How do you actually best engage the next generation of investors as an advisor? What does that look like? What is the opportunity and how different and what's different about that compared to how you've done it before with a different cohort of customers? Our guest today, he's an advisor. He's also a podcast host, and he's the founder and CEO of a wealth tech startup. So it's kind of cool. We have a few things in common on our resume. And the company that he is running is a company called Asset Map. We have Adam Holt. Welcome.
Hello, my friends. How are you?
We're doing great. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having.
Adam, we like to kind of kick it off with people on the podcast because of our very direct name, From the Ground Up, to understand your kind of from the ground up story. And so selfishly, again, like I said, we have some overlap in kind of our background and I think what led us to doing the things we're now doing. We'd love to hear your version of that. And so maybe hit on, the what part. What is Asset Map? What are you building? And then jump back to, if you could, what started it? What got you to, doing this sort of wild, bizarre thing of trying to start a company and build a new solution and do all those things?
I joked that I was a glutton for punishment, but thanks. I was scared there. I thought you were going to ask me to go all the way back to my childhood roots. And seeds, like true seeds planted. If I want
the very beginning. So talk us through day one, to today.
Yeah, honestly, my family would probably argue it did start all the way back then. So I tend to joke today when people ask what I do. I say I'm a recovering advisor, recovering financial planner for 26 years. You can relate to that. Learning from the business, coming into it. I actually, before being a recovering planner, I like to think of myself as an artist, and I was very much into art and sculpture and painting, but I knew I would never get a job. So I figured I could become a life insurance agent, right? Why not?
Practical.
Actually, I thought I was going to be a financial planner. They just told me I needed to sell life insurance in order to stay a financial planner.
Yeah.
So classic.
There's a catch.
Learn how to be a salesperson and also deliver advice. But I realized actually financial planning was my bailiwick. I loved communicating, educating people. And early on, I had a bunch of success actually acquiring assets and doing insurance work using financial planning. So big surprise. I got connected to a high net worth organization that was doing estate planning. They were looking for a young person, very much like today's market, where we'll call them aged, or we'll call them mature practices that now need next generation blood.
Very nice.
I was in that right place at the right time. So the big challenge I was trying to solve, Zach, was, how do I talk to these high net worth clients in a way where they could understand what's going on in their lives? Because that was the big problem. High net worth clients had a lot of complexity. We wanted to find ways that we could solve problems with asset gathering, insurance, and different structures. And I said, I think I need to take my art skill and start drawing out what's going on in people's lives. So the interesting thing about Asset Map, it's a mashup between the need to communicate visually on one page, not 80 pages. Like, they didn't want to read my huge financial planning report that took me 10 hours. They didn't care. They wanted to know what's going on in their lives and what could we do better. So Asset Map was really born out of that necessity.
It is amazing what advisors do. There's this interesting dichotomy of what we do. The tactical side is inherently complex and multifaceted, right? Everything from what needs to happen in an estate plan to cash flow to insurance and everything on the balance sheet. And that other side is the need for simplicity and distilling complex ideas into a clear story. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about this, and we'll continue to talk about it during this conversation, but tech has really reinforced the complexity as opposed to making it simpler.
Yeah.
And it's always fascinating, for us at Seeds, and I would imagine for you guys, of like, when you bring this simplicity to life and really empower advisors to make it simple for their clients, there's a light bulb moment. It's like, wow, I can actually bring them into the conversation in a way that is intuitive and meaningful and makes them feel heard. But it's ironically new, right? It's like, wow, this is not 50 pages of a, comprehensive financial plan. So I'm just curious, your experience with that. And as you have conversations with firms, kind of witnessing that light bulb moment, if you will.
You're right on. Look, I think we all know, Mark Twain said it best, right? He said, I wrote you this long letter because I didn't have enough time to make it short and concise, right? And so the irony behind financial planning is that we've been using the analytical side, right? Look at this fantastic Morningstar report and this great e-money plan I built for you. And look at all this credibility to show why I deserve to be your advisor. It was a credibility play to show the client that we're actually doing very complex technical stuff. We needed to show that complexity. I don't want to say to intimidate them, but to prove that we were valuable to have on the team, and that's why they should pay us 1%. And I don't want to say that was true sales enablement, but frankly, that's what happened. We all knew that CFPs who were doing this process were making 40, 50% more revenue than everybody else because they were acquiring holistically more business by approaching it this way. The challenge is that they kept doing this, assuming what the advisor wanted, not what the customer wanted. The customer didn't want to be intimidated. Once the customer trusted you and said, yeah, okay, that's fine. Keep the cooking in the back. Just bring the plate. I just want the dessert, buddy. Give me the executive summary. Now, high net worth knew this forever, and they were willing to pay for it. They would have a 2-3 person team, and there was an insurance expert and an investment expert and a legal and a tax, and then like a quarterback that really helped communicate with all the family members. And I think that what we're starting to see now is that technology has the capacity to scale a collaborative experience. The challenge is that we have not created yet, I think AssetMap is starting to do this, a way for everybody to be on the same page, regardless of acumen and interest. And it turns out that the equalizing factor for all of us is, let's just start with the facts of what you got. The people, the assets, the liabilities, the commitments you made, cash flows, and the insurance policies you've collected, and all the legal entities that are part of your household. Let's just take that information, no judgment, and just put that on a visualization. Now we get free permission to talk about it all. Transparency actually is what allows us to take the conversation in different directions: estate planning, retirement distribution, whatever it is. It gives the freedom back to the advisor to talk about it.
It's funny because you see this across everything. So even if you're leading a team, right, you hear this all the time of like, if you want to communicate your vision to the team, visualizing it and distilling it down into something very meaningful and specific and clear is like majority of the work of the leader. You know what I mean? And in these relationships, it's very similar. You're trying to get buy-in on a plan, but what you're really trying to do is lead. And so it's interesting, as you were saying that, and as you were describing AssetMap, it's very, very similar to just any other part of life, basically. And it's just funny because I think financial planning is so complicated. It's easy to get lost in the details, and to not see the value when you're so deep into them. So,
right.
Adam, you also made me think of another irony of people, that moment of putting it all on the screen and having it in one place. Part of the reason the person has walked in your door is to just get organized, and the disconnect of, that's such a crucial pain point, like almost inherently in anybody walking in the door to work with an advisor. And rather than solve that thing in the moment, advisors just kind of like, poke about getting you the statements and getting the information and whatever, and then never resurface it, never bring it back to life to show the person how it's now been organized. It's just, thanks, now I can do all my complicated tinkering, but not actually solve one of the reasons you actually step foot in my office or Zoom meeting or whatever, which is just to actually alleviate this unknown of all these things floating around in my life right now.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I'm going to make a generalization. Advisors are so deep in the knowledge that they've gathered, and they know how to, micromanage all these things and make better decisions. They're talking to a customer that is literally motivated by an emotion or a concern or a fear. And if there's two people in that room, they're completely different fears likely, right? We all know opposites attract. And so what we haven't really seen a lot, we've seen some really good advisors be empathetic to what they're going through and try to talk to them on their level, both of their level, not just the one client who actually wants to talk to you. The other one's like, I don't care what you do. The under-engaged spouse, we tend to call it. And of course, by the way, a real big challenge in the GWT, that great wealth transfer we're going to talk about. But I think that's the real key is we were trying to create a normalization. Like, let's get everybody on the same page, regardless of complexity, offshore, onshore, this currency, that currency, just the facts on the same page. And let's talk about them, I think, in a way that's not going to be intimidating, but rather inclusive. And that way, some people can ask basic questions like, what's an IRA? Or, hey, why can we manage this and get better tax efficiency out of this? Or we move this about? Yes, we can have both those conversations in Asset Map. But I think you got to basically be inviting to the table. And that's where I think advisors have missed it, is they're really bringing the back office and they're dumping it on the table. And it's just not appealing UX anymore. That customer experience is just,
I have a question. I've actually I've thought of this before when looking at Asset Map from afar. So I'm just curious. When you are onboarding someone to use, well, not you, but when someone is onboarding someone to use Asset Map, do you struggle a lot with the advisor feeling comfortable to let go of all of that detail and just like put it out there and be like, let's talk about this, like just open it up? Do you struggle with that? Because on the investing side, with what we do, it is something we've run into a bit of like, but this is kind of my security blanket. This is how I feel comfortable, is in the depth.
Complexity is my security blanket. That 50-page document is, that's what I do, and that's the story I tell. So you're telling me to tell a different story. How do they give it up?
That's a really interesting question. I would say it's a framing question. Okay. So it's like everything. Once you recognize you can grow in a certain area, now you have to actually say, okay, I'm going to intentionally grow in that area, or I'm going to ignore it, right? Like, just like every one of our clients, I can point out that you probably should save, but what they actually do is another question, right? So I would answer you this way. One of the ways that we've tried to compel advisors to say, hey, maybe this is a front end onboarding, or what we call now advice on ramping. Okay. I always think, I hear onboarding and I think waterboarding, and I'm like, that's no good. I don't want to onboard anybody. Right. Yeah. Wait, you're going to waterboard? See, I grew up I'm an ex-gen. So there was that. I went to camp. We waterboarded each other. That's just like what you did for fun.
Yeah. It's fun bonding.
Right, exactly. Hazing before was crazy.
Sounds like a guy thing.
It was, probably.
You didn't do that? That wasn't part of your upbringing, Kelsey?
No, I don't know.
I was not in the CIA, actually, which is kind of fun. Anyway, as an aside, the importance of on-ramping advice is really showing the client that you care about the bigger picture, not just the details. The funny thing is that the opportunity is in the big picture, not just in the details. So whereas advisors typically would go for, send me your statements, I'll break it apart and I'll tell you what's working, what's not, what you're paying, and that's basically like 101 sales. I'm going to come back with a better recommendation than what you got. And of course I'm going to earn that business. But by looking at the big picture, I'm showing that I'm actually being holistic. So what we tend to say is, we actually teach all of our advisors to use Asset Map the following. Look, Zach, look, Kelsey, I want to take a step back for a second. Instead of asking you about the statements, I've taken the liberty of creating a high-level visualization of all the stuff going on in your family. Here's a picture of you. Here you can see, here's your spouse. Here's your kids. Here's your mother-in-law that you said you're taking care of. Here's your business. Here's your trust. And then here's all of the different things that you're doing right now. All that clutter, I've organized it in a visual way by what is it? Where is it? What's it worth? Who controls it? And the tax wrapper. Now let's have an honest conversation about what fits and what needs to be filled. By showing that I'm empathetic to their needs, whether they ask for it or not, I took the liberty of creating this for you because I care that you understand the context of what we're going to talk about. Because we're going to focus on this thing over here, this little account over here that you sent me the statements for, or you didn't. Or I'd like you to send me the statements for this account that you have at these 5 other advisors you didn't tell me about now. Because the irony behind it is, when you have an asset map in front of the client, they have a strange desire to make it accurate. So they start revealing the stuff you didn't think to ask about. Like, oh, I got this CD at this bank for $100,000. I just let it roll. I don't know. Should I not do that anymore? They're paying me 2%, right? no, yes, you should. I don't need a statement. I didn't think to ask you about the statement, but now you just revealed to me, oh yeah, by the way, I own this company where they're about to liquidate it. I'm like, is that money also, duh, of course, but you didn't ask me about it. So the client didn't send the you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Alts, private equity, VC investments, real estate with my brother-in-law, like people have stuff all over the place. And when they get it on a map, they reveal it and it allows you to literally give contextual advice. And that's the difference that I think advisors don't think about because they're looking for there's a statement security.
For our version of what you're doing at Asset Map, and we're our focus on the investment management side, but the through lines, there's a couple that I'm thinking about. It's making the planning process and the investment management process actually what we would say customer centric as opposed to advisor centric.
Yeah.
And just framing it around them as opposed to me and my specialties and what I'm tactically good at doing, because that should all just be table stakes stuff. They're presuming that when they walk in the door. And the other piece is it's amazing the power of making this stuff even a little bit collaborative as opposed to this wall between me and you. And I need the statements. So for Asset Map, I need all the documents. I need the balance sheet stuff. I need everything. You're going to send it to me. I'm going to take it behind the curtain and tinker. And then I'm going to come back with that 50-page result.
Yeah.
And for us, it's the same of give me, these inputs from a goals and risk and preferences standpoint, but we're just going to take that behind the curtain and come back to you with this 20-page Morningstar proposal of our special investment solution. The moment it's collaborative, the moment they have the, asset maps on the screen and it's exactly what you just said. Oh, you're missing this piece. Oh, we need to think about how this moves to this. The paradigm is completely changed, right? They're in it now. They're participating in the process in a way that builds trust as opposed to, what are you doing behind that curtain exactly? What is your specialty and what does this all mean to me?
Well, and one of the things that I find, so this is like a connection to another type of work, but basically there's this idea in marketing of like a push-pull dynamic where it's like, you want to get to a point where your messaging is pulling, like your audience is pulling your messaging out of you. So they're creating the pull of that valuable content because they're so engaged with it, right? Totally. So when you're describing it, it really reminds me of that, of like moving from this, I'm going to push my value onto you. I have so much value that I'm going to push it onto you, and getting to a state where you create enough of an environment that is centered around what they care about and like their true life, that they're able to pull the right services and the right value out of you, and you're not having to force feed it to them basically through like a very strict process. So that's what it's making me think of, is that marketing, that idea within marketing, but applied to like service delivery. Which I haven't actually made that connection even for seeds. So we should think about that more, Zach.
There you go.
Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome.
Adam.
Anything else?
Thanks for solving some problems.
Well, I think you just solved it yourself. But I think you really, the irony for those that are listening was really special. Maybe you go back and listen to what you just said for 30 seconds. Because it's in the moment when we tee up the conversation that you will solve the problem yourself. You now have ownership. You are empowered. And even though it doesn't feel like I did it to you, I helped do it for you. We facilitate that conversation by enabling having it. It turns out actually that one of the most amazing things that we happened in my own practice, and I got to about $1.2 billion of AUM natively. We were in the insurance business. We were gathering assets. We were finding it on the map. Like, do you want us to manage that? I see you have 6 different IRAs at different firms. Why is that? And I would just ask the question. Client would say, well, I left it here. This is my cousin. This is my buddy from golf. I don't know. Is anybody actually coordinating all this stuff? Are you like investing in the same thing across all these advisors? You're paying them all different fees, so basically to do the same exact thing. There's no diversity here. I never thought of it like that. Gosh, this must be bare on the clutter, like getting all these statements, trying to manage like look at performance. You probably don't even look at it. You're right. Why don't we just consolidate that? Wait, I can do that? Yep. I tell you what, why don't we just roll it over? Do I need to see a statement? Nope. Did I earn the assets? Yeah, because I solved the real problem that he didn't think about until he saw it all there in a mess. So it turns out what we really want to do is do what you just said, Kelsey, which is in that moment, it teed up for me the opportunity to add value without being asked. And I just proved my credibility, didn't I? Because I saw the problem, I explained it, he understood or she did. And then they let me, Adam, go fix it. Because clearly you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Did I have to sell? Nope. They just had to reveal the truth to me and give me an environment to talk about and ask questions. I just want to ask good questions. Why are you doing that? Have you thought about this? Why'd you choose this? What's the goal? Like literally like Columbo style, if you remember those days. Where were you on the night of the murder? I just need to ask you good questions. And I think that's the key. Advisors will deliver more humanity and more value if they could just ask better questions.
Some business magic. Again, another business magic moment. I'm excited. Okay, but we should get to our real topic.
I know.
Now we're like way deep into
Now I
this.
feel bad. Now I feel bad even trying to segue us into like some actual specific questions here, but we're going to do it anyway. And I actually think, Kelsey, I'll hand it to you, but talking about the next generation and them as an opportunity, but also as a clean slate. So in what we were just touching on about, reframing for, I forget what you said, Adam, more mature advisory firms, I think was the phrase.
Yeah, mature.
So reframing storytelling to firms like that, where for them it has quote unquote worked already, the way that they've been doing it, is you got a clean slate with the next generation of investors. So Kelsey, how are we framing up the topic?
Yes, so many advisors, every conference I go to, we're talking about this. Advisors are asking about this. They're very drawn to this. And, the great wealth transfer, I know you're going to speak a little bit about that, Adam, and what it means. But we really want to get specific with some tips here. Okay. So some tips for advisors. So each of us has brought at least one tip. And we want to give our tips for engaging with the next gen.
Okay.
That's it.
You're going to give yours
and
first?
I'm going to go first. So I like to introduce myself to give a tip. So here we go.
Yeah.
My tip. First. Yes. There we go. My tip is kind of a strange tip, but it's based on some conversations I've been having with individuals who are in the next gen who will inherit their parents' wealth. And these are friends, colleagues. I've even had some with folks I've interviewed for roles recently, which has been interesting because they're in this space. So these are people who know what advisors do. These aren't just random people on the street. My tip is assume the worst. That's my tip. And I will explain why. So I think that a lot of members of the next gen actually do have even more negative assumptions about what a financial advisor does and the experience they deliver than anyone else an advisor would be approaching as even a warm referral or a lead that comes into fills out a form on their website. And the reason for that is from everything I'm hearing from folks I know who are in this category, they just feel like it's outdated. That's kind of the vibe, is they feel like this isn't for me. So my tip and why I say assume the worst is because I honestly think if you sit with that, you're in a better position to go into any meetings with the next gen of your clients and truly just seek to understand what they're looking for. If you go in assuming that they already have a positive impression and they want exactly what you gave their parents, I think that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage because you're not going to be open and willing to hear whatever it is they have to say, even if they're not directly saying it. So you should be seeking and be open to and seeking, hey, what are you looking for? What are you seeking in an experience from a financial advisor? What do you believe a financial advisor even does? I'm just curious because I think that there's an assumption that their parents are telling them or explaining this to them. But from what I'm hearing, they're not. In most cases. So my tip is assume the worst, to put yourself into a mindset of I genuinely want to understand the next gen so I can build an experience that feels like it's for them and that will resonate with them. I tried to make it kind of like a hot take so that people were like, what? Assume the worst? Did it work? Were you totally surprised by how I framed it? Okay. Okay. Well, you're advisors by background. So test audience.
Right. You are correct, by the way. I have data that supports what you said. So that's fantastic. Okay. She's right, by the way.
Yeah, there's someone I spoke to yesterday who is like, I love the idea, but I don't want that. I don't want that experience. What I know of it, it's not for me and my husband. I don't think we want that. And that's tough to compete with, even if it's a warm intro from a trusted person.
These are the kids of your clients in a lot of cases. And it is them just having whatever assumptions about what your value is and the experience you're going to take them through. And it is, like I said a minute ago, it's an if nothing else, it's an opportunity to have a clean slate of feedback from a new cohort of people who might have negative assumptions and understand what you're fighting against. Because if that's the bar, then hopefully that's going to lead to a lot of improvement around the experience and using better technology and, really moving your business forward. But it also goes, Adam, to your point of you got to ask the question. If you just take them through the assembly line as it's existed historically, as opposed to tell me what you think you're walking into here.
You're essentially bringing like a new product to market to a new customer in this situation. Even though they're warm, even though you think that you already you think they're already somewhat captured, they're not. It's a completely new type of client that you haven't served before. So if you approach it with the same mindset of I'm going to speak the same way, I'm going to show the same things, I'm going to do the same steps and dance, I'm going to do engagement the same, I'm going to, it's not going to resonate because they're different. So, and assume that, I guess the point is like, know that, but then assume that they may have some more challenges to kind of overcome on their journey to trusting you.
All right, Adam, that one was depressing. So what's your
that
more
was
uplifting?
Exciting. It was motivating.
You got to just look at it from the exciting standpoint, right? If you don't do it, then it's depressing. If you do something about it, it's opportunistic.
Yeah.
Yes. You want one? I'll tell you.
We'll start with one.
I give you one. Okay, but I'm going to build off of Kelsey.
Yeah.
So for the years, when you're working with ultra high net worth, you have no choice but to work with multi-generations, because once you have enough money to cover retirement and all that other stuff that we always have to, work about, then you're thinking about bigger stuff like top of the pyramid, self-actualization stuff. You're thinking legacy, meaning, purpose, generational wealth. What's the burden of that going to be? What's the values I want to espouse? So you can't help but deal with multiple generations up and down and sometimes sideways, because the bigger wealth transfer, that estate planning tends to motivate, of course, with taxes and losses and protecting against all the dumb things my kids are going to do. And, so those are top of mind conversations. So you get permission to talk. So let me tell you what worked in high net worth that will work now in every market. It is very clear that the baby boomer population that we all talk about has the money, the 83 some trillion dollars that's going to transfer or a bit be consumed. It's going to go to X and Y generation for the most part. Very few people have thought about this, but X generation already controls something like 30 to 40 trillion dollars already. Okay. Because they've been saving to their 401k that's invested in the S&P for the past 20 years. Okay. They were told to save. They did it. They have the Roth IRAs. They bought real estate. They bought a second home. They have a couple cars and they have savings, and they can actually, unlike the boomers who, when they had $500,000, the boomers like, we need to talk to a financial advisor. X generation could go to 2 to 3 million in assets and not have to talk to an advisor. So recognize these are the guys that are going to inherit this money. Here's what I'm seeing. The boomers, unlike the greatest generation before them, that was very tight-lipped about money. They never talked about money. It was like a humility thing. Okay. So the boomers, unlike them, were what? They were like the hippie generation. They talk about everything with their kids. They raised their kids and gave them medals for everything. They're bringing their kids, their adult children, into the financial planning conversation early. They're not waiting for the GWT. They're not waiting to demise to say, hey, hon, daughter, this is where my money's going. And they're bringing them in now because they trust them. They're now established 40s, 50s-year-old. So why do I tell you this? Because I'm telling you, any financial advisor who has boomer clients, their adult children are like, they're going to be involved before they even pass on, because you're going to deal with long-term care, hospice, and all this stuff. So here's what you have to do. You call up your clients and you say, listen, now I know how to do it with Asset Map, and that's how I did it. I say, I'm going to have a family meeting. We're going to hold a family meeting because we've done all this amazing planning. We want to share it with the next generation who is going to have take on a bigger responsibility. Your executor, your executrix, the trustees for all the good work we're planning. I need to tell them where all the treasure's buried. They need to know this is in your drawer. They need to know all this stuff. We've already organized it. Let's bring them in. And instead of showing the next generation, well, here's how we've allocated. Here's your beta and alpha for Nana and Grandma. Here's what the fee charges. Forget that stuff. All we're going to talk about is what good work we've done to organize and structure mom and dad to support their life so that it's not a burden on you. And when ultimately we transition this to usually one survivor and then a next, that we've got it so organized and locked up, we are going to be your saviors. And you're not going to have to think about any of that. Do you know what it's like to actually deal with an estate when no one was organized?
Yeah.
It takes about 3 to 6 months of your life. And the memories of that party is not how all the great memories. It's, gosh darn it, couldn't they have just called that attorney? Couldn't they have just moved those shares? Why was no one there to help them? And I think we actually run a real risk in this new fiduciary standard of kids of our clients coming back and say, like, why didn't you sell my parents long-term care? Why didn't you actually do this trust planning? Why didn't you bring me in early? So the good side and the bad side of this is if you don't do it, it's happening already. If you do it, you can engage the next generation, not with necessarily, oh, cool process, old antiquated process. Let me show you my thoughtfulness and my position in the family of being aware of where everything is so I'm invaluable. And I think that's what we learned in treasure mapping, is that when you basically leave somebody, when you pass on in this life, they're not going to be lost if you give them a map and directions. A map and directions. Are you as an advisor going to deliver the map and directions to those recipients, or are you going to wait for them to take the business from you and then try to salvage? It's not going to work.
Yeah, I love it. And it's a good on-ramp to my thought of basically the next step, in my opinion, which would be, so you get them into those conversations, they feel that organization.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about, as opposed to, again, they don't care about the expertise stuff. All of that is assumed. So it's, you've organized my parents' financial lives and set them up in a way that has made them financially independent. And now that is my blessing and curse as a possible recipient of that. But now I actually understand what that's going to mean. My part 2 to that, and encouragement to advisors, is this not maybe the second the family meeting ends, but shortly after, okay, what does it mean to you now? What does it mean to you as the person who may or may not receive this wealth, but is also making a couple $100,000 and building a family and doing all these things in your life, and who very much cares about the top of the triangle stuff, even though they're still building wealth, but that is the framework for them of what planning means. And that's another component of my points, I guess, which is, the framework of, like, I'm just putting you on this path to be able to retire in the future, is not the framing that in general, the next generation investor really cares about. It's, do you understand me, what I'm trying to accomplish, what's most important to me? And so anyway, it's the part 2 to what I think you just said, Adam, which is, you see what we've done for your parents. We see what that means for you, but also now tell us more about you and what does that plan look like for you?
I appreciate you saying that. And frankly, you're right. The close of that conversation, if you're going to take this to heart, those listening, is then you say, listen, if you want this process for you and your family, and for you and your siblings that are going to be executors, and they're going to benefit from all the good work that we've been doing for your family for years, and the whole team we've put together to support you, I'm happy to do this because you're part of the family. And just offer to them. No expectation, to saying, we'll map this out for you so you have your map. We'll get you access to mom. We can share digital access now to mom and dad's map if they say it's okay. And you can get read-only access. So, like, you don't even have to call me. You know where everything is buried, God forbid. And then when you call me to go interpret it, I'm going to be there with you, hold your hand. But if you think this makes sense to do for you today so that your family knows where their stuff is, I'm happy to do it for free because you're part of the household. And that's when you offer instead of you kind of sell. And then you walk away and you let them decide whether they want to pursue that or not. I think that's how you engage next generation. They do not get forced into anything.
What I like about this conversation, building upon my little quick tip at the beginning. So
wonderful tip.
Thank you. What I always talk about is, like, your expertise, like, it literally means nothing if you can't use your expertise to deliver value to the client that you serve. So what you did, Adam, and then what you followed up on, Zach, is you're actually saying, this is the value they want to receive because you know the problem well enough to understand how to solution the problem. So I think, like, broad takeaway from this whole conversation is, like, don't just have that person being, like, the silent fly on the wall in these conversations, serve them before they're a client, deliver value, demonstrate value. It's essentially a trial period. Like if you were buying software, show the value by connecting not only to what the needs are of the primary client, but what the needs are of that secondary client in a very true and meaningful way. And that's where I think advisors can stand out and be different than what is expected of this industry at this point by next gen people of next gen. So I think that that's something that could be taken away is like the reason you're able to give these tips, both of you, is because you've sought understanding of what the real problem is. So you can say, hey, I know how to give another advisor a tip on how to serve them because these are the things they're struggling with. They're afraid. They're afraid they're not going to know where things are. They're afraid they're going to be disorganized and their parent's going to die. They're going to be left with a mess. That's a lot of bundled emotions. So you're solutioning that and passing that solution on to others. So I just don't want it to be missed that like that's the root of being able to do that or build an asset map or build seeds is that understanding, of what's going on in the interpersonal dynamics and emotions of all the people in the room.
I feel like we've really kind of solved the entire industry in one podcast episode.
It's over.
And I'll wrap us up here in a minute. But yeah, it's Adam. The Seeds quick backstory is taking a next gen client in our advisory business through the traditional explanation of how we do investment management within the context of this holistic financial plan we were going to provide this person. And that story of we have a bunch of CFAs, we build models and special portfolios this way. Here's how we're going to show you what that means and the beta and standard deviation, and me-centered. And that person sending an email saying, I literally could care less about any of those things. You didn't ask me one thing about if I'm going to give you what I'm going to inherit from my parents and what I also have now to manage. You didn't ask me anything about what's in my head about what that means. And that's literally all I care about. You don't have to have the CFA. You don't have to tell me about the CFAs and the credentials and the air quotes special stuff. How could that even be brought to life if you don't know what's meaningful to me? And so that's the through line here, I think, is it's so much clearer in next generation that that's the experience expectation, and advisors realizing that, yeah, the complex credential me-centered value proposition story worked well enough to make a lot of advisors very successful. But there is a meaningful difference now with the next person and people walking in the door to become your customers that you're going to need to grow your business if you actually seek to do that. And it's really about asking better questions and framing it around them.
But we have to take this to tech really quick because just to protect the advisors, such as my dad, and your dad, Zach, like to protect the history here. Tech has not done, like going back to the beginning of this conversation, tech has not done a good job of enabling this. So Adam, you were doing art to facilitate this experience that you had a vision for because you could see the problem. And Zach, you were writing a little assessment yourself to try to better categorize investors and understand their motivations. So you two were willing to go build companies, and that's awesome. Like, go you. But for other advisors, like that's what you should be looking for in your tech. You should be looking for tech that enables the experience that you want to deliver. It shouldn't anymore be acceptable that your tech, that you're just expected to figure it out. You're just expected to put all these like disparate pieces together. And somehow, even though technology exists, and the whole point of technology is to enable a better world, basically.
The amount of times, we ask advisors like, okay, you're using this platform. Like, what does that do for you? What does that mean for you in the business? And their challenge in articulating it is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I think I have a way to say it. You ready? So everybody's heard of AI, right? Everybody's thinking AI is going to change the game, and it will. But that's not what customers are paying for. They're paying for what I call the original AI, which is advisor intelligence, and having that applied to my life in real time, regardless of what I'm going through. So can we find a way to apply advisor intelligence to clients' lives that's empathetic, that's human, that's also tax, legal, insurance, investment, all the other technical stuff? can we apply that? If you can find a way to do that in an empathetic way, you win. Tech should just support everything, just should be pushing us to that moment where we're delivering contextual advice. And that's where I think that's where we earn our ability to stay on the team.
Yeah. Love it.
Love it. I feel like we should end there. That was a nice
That is the mic
bow.
drop moment. But before we officially wrap, Adam, where should people find you, find Asset Map, get a demo, all that fun stuff?
Well, the best way is go to our website, asset-map.com. You can certainly Google us. LinkedIn is best if you want to connect with me. I love connecting on LinkedIn. I put a lot of content out there. I say stuff I'm not allowed to say. So yeah, that's the best way to find me. Just connect.
Awesome. Well, we very much appreciate you joining us. And if people haven't found Seeds yet, come find Seeds as well, www.seedsinvestor.com. And we'll see everybody next time.